outlets, and they seem to just be accelerating what's not working.
I think that's a really good analysis. They are hysterical. People who see the end coming tend to get hysterical. A lot of these are people who can't function outside the media. They never make it in a normal job. The only option for them is to go to some depressing PR firm. They know it. You know, they've had really easy jobs all these years. They've had a full monopoly on information in the country, and they're looking at retirement years that are pretty bleak. And so they're lashing out, I would say, and they've totally abandoned their standards. I mean, they've always been obviously aligned with the Democratic Party. They've always been liberal. Most journalists are liberal. But after the 2008 election, they just took the mask off, and they're just kind of openly cheerleading for one political party. And in so doing, as you just said, they devalue their own currency. Nobody believes them anymore. NBC is the least trusted news organization in the country. When did that happen? I mean, it didn't take long, by the way. I don't know exactly what the numbers were, but I bet 15 years ago, NBC was probably number 2 behind ABC, and now they're at the bottom. So that tells you what you get when you just decide, you know what, I'm no longer a news company. I'm a political operation. That's what they are.
What does it mean for them? How do you see the fall of the dinosaurs? Because they're already in the desert. They already don't have any water. Some of them are starting to fall down and die. And they're in their death throes. And obviously government can't come in with censorship and regulation, though they're trying to save the day. No amount of stimulus money to MSNBC or NPR is going to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So if we're beginning to see rigor mortis set in, what do you expect the final death throes to look like? And what is your gut as a successful media guy on your own, independently, and inside the system? What do you, in your gut, think things are going to look like, say, in 5 years?
Well, I think, look, I'm 45, so I'm not that old. I remember when I started in this business, I mean, my dad was in this business, so I've been around it all my life, and I remember when I graduated college thinking, I want to work at Newsweek or Time. I mean, that was a big deal. Those were the best places for a magazine writer to work, and I was a magazine writer. And now they don't exist. I mean, I guess maybe they do technically exist, but they kind of slip beneath the waves with almost no notice. Newsweek was bought by, the rich husband of a Democratic congresswoman, and then it kind of went bankrupt, and now it just exists online, I guess, sort of. I mean, they just kind of faded away, but they did so really, really quickly. And I think the same thing will happen, maybe even faster, to the broadcast networks, because the truth is, you and I could pool our money and put out a magazine. We couldn't pool our money and put out a TV channel because it's really expensive to operate a television network, as you know, and so a broadcast television network. So I just think they're unsustainable. I mean, they will go away. I bet 10 years from now they won't exist. And it's kind of a shame. I mean, I'm talking about the news networks. There'll always be a role for entertainment, obviously, and sports. But the big-time news networks, I don't think will be here. And I think a lot of it's their fault. I mean, they don't get it, by the way. They are so... If you go... I mean, I spend a lot of time in that world because I live in New York part of the week, and everybody in that world is exactly the same. There's no air. They never let the door open and let new ideas or fresh perspectives or people with different backgrounds in. They talk about diversity, but it is the most homogeneous group.
Well, that was my next point, is they're like a cult of dodo birds that don't realize the sailors just arrived and they're all about to get eaten. And
true.
And when I watch CNN or MSNBC especially, it is a revolving door of all these Democratic Party chiefs of staff and all these hacks. And it'd be one thing if they were well-spoken or good-looking or interesting or funny, but they're so selfish, they go advise the network heads to put them in, even though it only makes the ratings drop. But they don't care because even though it's a diminishing narcissistic platform, they don't care because they feel like they're successful when they go home for Thanksgiving with mom and dad. I mean, I tell you, I really think they've lost control, and I think that's why they're counting on the police state, Tucker, is because they think oppression will work. That's not going to work either. I think this political class is basically done.
Well, I used to think, of course, I agree with you completely. I think they're going to be replaced probably sooner than they realize because we're in this moment of convulsion and change for sure. But what I'm so struck by is how much liberals have changed. When I was a kid, they were, or at least I believe them to be, really kind of committed to free speech. I mean, they defended the right of the creeps to march at Skokie.
They had some moral high ground.
I'll die for your right to express yourself, even if I disagree. Something happened along the way. I don't recognize modern liberals. They're fully authoritarian. They don't want you to speak. You're threatening me with your speech. I feel uncomfortable. You're making this an unsafe place. Be quiet or I'll arrest you. Really? They have no regard for the First Amendment. It's conservatives who are standing up for the First Amendment. That is a total reversal of the way things were when I was a kid.
Well, that's right, and that's why people liked liberals, even if you disagree with some of their politics. Hey, they're for free speech. Hey, they're for labeling GMO. Hey, they're for diversity. Now it's a cult, and that was another question I was going to bring up. I could play these clips, but back when the Boston bombing happened, they had a host on there say, on purpose, and they had the former head of the RNC on there with them agreeing with it, yeah, they bombed it because they listened to Alex Jones, and he influenced the bombers, and he's deeply racist. And I went to my lawyer, and he said, yeah, you can spend $1 million, win a lawsuit, and win maybe $2 million, kind of like Ventura did. He said, do you want to waste your time? It's going to be hell. Is your time worth it? And I said, no. But I came to the realization, MSNBC 5 years ago would have never come out and said that I'm involved in the Boston bombing and I'm deeply racist without showing some proof, even if it was flimsy. So, yes, there is a major shift now where it's like they're trying to commit suicide politically in front of us, and they don't see it because they're still in the big rotting facade. When I went and debated Piers Morgan, I'd been in those same studios a few years before. They were nice. It was rotting. The bathrooms were uncleaned. Everyone looked depressed, like a demoralized army that was about to collapse. And that's what I see them doing, but it's the wildness and the not caring and the no standard. I could have sued them and won. And, I mean, guaranteed, my lawyer said he's one of the top lawyers in Texas. And they just, of course, I'm not suing them, but it shows a recklessness. What do you take from that rant?
Well, my jaw is open that they called you racist. I mean, it's one thing, that I hate to say it, but that term has lost almost all meaning. It doesn't really mean anything anymore. Basically, it's a way of telling you to be quiet. We don't want to hear what you're saying. What you say threatens our power, therefore, shut up. I mean, that's the message of you're racist. It's not the beginning of a conversation about tolerance or diversity or what racism is. It's an attempt to end the conversation, to end your speech by calling you names. And it's the most tired thing and the dumbest thing ever. I think you're very wise not even to bother with a lawsuit, with them. That's a drain on your energy. Lawsuits almost always are, even when you win. It saps all your mojo, I think.
Sure, that's why I brought it up. But the recklessness, like when I was on Nightline 5 years ago, they tried to fact check, they tried to research. Yeah, they tried to discredit me, but they did a journalistic job at least half baked. They don't even put the cake in the oven now.
No, because they don't have to.
Yeah.
Because nobody cares. I mean, that's kind of the flip side. Whereas 15 years ago, NBC News was a big deal. It was respected. People expected that they would do diligence when they said things. Now it's like, yeah, whatever. It's MSNBC. They're crazy. It's the Leon Trotsky channel. Nobody cares. You know what I mean? Like, there really isn't an expectation that they're accurate in the first place.
Yes.
So it's not as big a deal.
But then Daily Caller can have millions of visitors every day. Infowars.com can have that. This talk radio show has conservatively, and it's a small show compared to a lot of them, 3 million people a day. You count, YouTube and stuff every week. It's like 15 to 18 million people tune in or watch. And then you look at CNN and others, and they're just still, you've been inside there so much. Are they really arrogant, or is it a front, Tucker?
Oh, no. Oh, the arrogance is bone deep. The arrogance is the one thing that's real. It's the one thing they all have in common. And again, it's the product of never meeting anybody who disagrees with you. I mean, you know what? Look, even in Texas, there are lots of people who don't share your views.
Yes,
there is political diversity in Texas.
I live in Austin.
It's a pretty red state, but there are blue parts of it, especially where you live. They live in a world where nobody disagrees with them. They never meet anybody with a different view. So their impression is that outside of the west side of Manhattan, everyone's like a cannibal or married to a sister or handling snakes or, smoking meth. Like, they have the lowest possible opinion of America.
They really do underestimate America. So in the final equation, before we shift back into the election, go to break, take some calls, we've got a short clip we're going to play of James O'Keefe of the Veritas Project. I want to get your view on what he's been doing as well. But So do you expect them to try to then bring in some type of fairness doctrine over the internet? I know the Senate's been talking about that.
Well, I mean, I think that is absolutely the goal, but it won't be done under the normal justification. The justification was before for the fairness doctrine, as you know, was we need the airwaves are a public trust. They belong to everybody, therefore you ought to have both sides on them. Now the airwaves don't exist. Everything is digital. You can't make that. You can't use that as justification. So now they will use some species of diversity. That this is a pluralistic country, it's a multi-ethnic country, and too many news organizations are owned by one group, and the government is going to force equal representation on the airwaves. And that's, if I had to guess, that will be the justification.
And then they'll break up News Corps, set the precedent to go after everybody else. They've been talking about that. And then they'll break up news websites and say you've got to have an area to show different views. In fact, you're right. That's what they've been proposing.
Well, sure. And if you're against it, guess what? You're a, wait for it, racist.
Well, I have a lot of problems with some of the things Rupert Murdoch does. I know you work for him, but at the same time, they're popular because they have a lot more Americana-type stuff being promoted than CNN, MSNBC, and all of them combined. But I defended them during the hacking scandal because it was clearly political. It was clearly a witch hunt to try to bring them down and basically blackmail them to go along with the establishment. And now that's happening with statements out of, Rupert Murdoch about how great Hillary Clinton is. I just don't understand why so many of these blue blood conservatives are attacking the Tea Party and going with this party line. I think the real libertarian Tea Party is the hope of the Republican Party. What do you think?
Well, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I heard the smartest thing the other day from someone involved in Republican politics who said the Democratic Party is strong because there's perfect alignment between its donors and its voters. The rich people who fund the Democratic Party agree completely with the far left of their base, right? So George Soros agrees with your average primary voter in the Democratic Party. On the conservative side, Republican donors have total contempt for Republican voters, who really, the base of the Republican Party is kind of the Tea Party, libertarian, freedom-oriented people. Lower taxes, pretty socially conservative. That's not who funds the Republican Party. The Republican Party is funded by and large from business, Wall Street, and these are people who want lower taxes, less regulation for themselves, but they're certainly not above striking some sort of private deal with politicians to help their businesses. They're not at all socially conservative. They're as libertine as the Democrats. And so it's a problem when your funders hate your voters. You can see what I mean.
Wow. What will happen if conservatives and libertarians realize for survival, we've got to start really giving a lot of money to patriot-type candidates? Well, we know what will happen. They'll send in the IRS to harass everybody. So we see the weaknesses of the Death Star by where they've put their defenses. We blow up this political monopoly, this status monopoly, by not being intimidated by the IRS like the preachers are doing now, not being intimidated and politically giving, politically running. I think we become political animals like I did 20 years ago, like you did 30 years ago, for basic survival. You either get involved or we will basically go into a pure democracy where hordes of illegals will vote away our freedoms.
Well, that appears to be, as someone who grew up in California and looks back at that state when I grew up in it, I'm not that old. That state was the richest out of 50 and the nicest, had great schools, excellent infrastructure.
It's a wreck.
And it was pretty reasonable, politically. Now it's a one-party state that's literally crumbling and has more poverty than any other state. Why is that? Well, there's only one thing that changed, and that's the composition of the population in California because of immigration. So immigration changes your politics dramatically. And there are a lot of people at the donor level on the Republican Party side, I hate to say it, who really don't care because it means cheaper help for them at home and it means more profits for their businesses. And I think it's a very short-sighted view.
Well, that's right. It'd be one thing if they're bringing in giant groups of people to build them up. Like Ross Perot documented, this level of immigration will bring us down, and it won't even help the third world countries they're fleeing.
No, and it won't help the immigrants themselves. Look, at a certain point, you know, I'm for I'm for bringing in hardworking, smart people with a lot to contribute. I'm totally for that.
Absolutely.
What I'm totally against is in a post-industrial economy, bringing in people for whom there are no factory jobs, people with fourth-grade educations, who are poor. Nothing against them personally. God loves them as much as he loves anybody else.
But that's the issue, is the Democrats want people they can mold into whatever they want.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
To then social engineer our lives. Tucker Carlson, DailyCaller.com is our guest. I'm Alex Jones. We're going to come back, take your phone calls, play a short clip of an exclusive O'Keefe interview, and more.
We're on the march.